Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about all the big time storylines heading into this year for the Big Ten. There's quite a few that I didn't get a chance to get to, but at the end of the day, this is going to be a crazy conference with a number of things that could just go weird. I don't necessarily think it's going to be all over the place with upsets every single weekend and absolute chaos. I do think there's just enough opening for some of these second tier teams to really make some noise, and let's jump into those tiers as I see them going into the season for the Big Ten. I think the first one is very clear cut as far as I'm concerned. Then you get a little bit messy after that, but the top three are the top three. It's Oregon, Ohio State, and Penn State. I'm not necessarily in that order, but those are the three teams that are just above the rest of the pack. They always will be. Ohio State, obviously, is going to be in pole position for this conference just about every year until someone really takes over, whether it's Oregon or Penn State. Obviously, Oregon has a ton of turnover, but they have the ability to run the table again. If they can get that big win against Penn State, they are definitely going to be favored in every other game that they play and have every ability to run the table again, go to the Big Ten championship, and maybe be the number one seed once again. I don't know if they would love that, a little bit of PTSD, but as long as Ohio State's not the team waiting for them, I think they'll be okay. And then, obviously, Penn State. We just talked about it. They got to do it. This got to be the year that they break through. I don't know if they have to win a national title. I think some Penn State fans would tell you they have to win a national title. So it doesn't really matter what I say. It matters what those fans say, and it'll be really fascinating to watch these three kind of go at it throughout the year. Oregon and Ohio State do not play, but I think we get every other iteration of these three going at it. So going to be really fun to see how all of that shakes out. And if Penn State can break through against these other two teams that, while incredibly talented and on paper more talented than Penn State, are still in positions with a lot of questions going into this year. Then you have the X Factor teams, and I got about 7 teams in this category. I think there's a lot of teams that can make some big-time noise in this conference and be a Indiana of last year, if you will. You have Illinois. Obviously, Luke Altmaier and company can do some really special things this year. I think the losses of the 2 wide receivers is huge. I think they had some really good players on defense that could keep them in a lot of games, and Luke Altmaier is going to play good football. I don't know if he's going to totally change the world or, throw for 4,500 yards and do incredible stuff. I know he's going to keep you in a lot of football games and not make a ton of mistakes and, at the very least, play really, really good, competent football every week. That might just be enough with the pieces that he has around him and that defense that they have. And then you got Indiana, a team that brought in Fernando Mendoza to replace Curtis Rourke from a year ago. This is a more talented quarterback. Now, will he put it all together in year one? That still remains to be seen. A lot of changing parts. Tino Sunseri moves down to UCLA, so the play calling isn't changing, but definitely kind of the brain trust around that offense is definitely changing just a little bit going into this year. This is a very talented kid and absolutely someone that can get them back to the CFP. They just got to put it together a little bit better than it was last year even, because the schedule is getting that little bit harder. So that'll be something to watch, no doubt about it. You got Michigan in here. There's no doubt about it. I think there's a lot of people very low on Michigan. I can't decide how I feel on Michigan yet, but the new quarterback coming in, Bryce Underwood, is one of those guys that could become a superstar of the sport in this year. He absolutely has that upward ability. I don't know if he'll hit that ceiling this year, but at the end of the day, this is one of the most physically talented players in the entire country. We will see if he can actually put it together. And then the defense is the defense. I really don't think we have to talk too much about Michigan defenses going forward. They're going to be very aggressive in the pass rush. They're going to have really, really good linebacker play from Ernest Howman as well as Jayshon Barham. They're going to play good football and on the defensive side of the ball. I can absolutely promise you that. I don't know if they're holding people to 10 points a game or anything crazy. I do think they're keeping themselves in games, and if you're a freshman quarterback, I think you could ask for nothing better than a really good defense that keeps you in ball games and makes your job that little bit easier. Michigan absolutely will have something to say in this conference. Whether or not it's them going to the Big Ten title or not, I don't know, but it absolutely could be keeping someone else from going to Indianapolis at the end of the year like they did last year. Then you do have Nebraska. Dylan Raiola, he's got to take a step forward, but he's playing really, really good football. I understand that his first year was a little bit up and down, had some moments, missed a big-time pass in one of those games. I can't exactly remember which one right now. I think it was Illinois, but at the end of the day, he's played really good football. He's playing really professional football, kind of going through his reads, really comfortable in the pocket. Does get a little bit, I'm going to make this incredible sidearm throw from time to time, but has all of the raw talent you could possibly want. And he's getting more comfortable in this offense. If they can put it together defensively, if they can get some of these transfer receivers, especially one we'll talk about in the next segment, to come all together, this could very well be a special team and a schedule that sets up very nicely for them to do some real damage in this conference. Then you got Washington. Damon Williams is a special athlete in every sense of the word. If you saw that play against Louisville, you know that. He is absolutely incredible. Love Denzel Boston on the outside. I think Jonah Coleman in the backfield is a very, very good running back. And I think that defense is going to do enough. I don't necessarily think they're going to be absolutely incredible and totally shut down everyone. I think they added some really, really good pieces, and they have just enough talent there to make these games close. And I think Washington's going to be one of those teams where you find a close game down the stretch, Damon Williams is going to be really hard to keep track of, and he's absolutely someone that could change the game on a dime if you are not careful. So I think for Washington this year, it comes down to keep close, stay within 3 to 7 points, and then let that guy make a play at the end of the day, and he probably will, if we're being totally honest. Then you got USC, a very polarizing team, kind of like Michigan for kind of different reasons, but they upgraded on the defense. There's no doubt about that. They did a very, very good job in the portal, and we'll talk about one of those guys in the next segment. And I think they can put together a really nice offense. I love Mekhi Levin. Jacoby Lane is one of the best receivers in the entire country. I think they have the ability to get back on track there. It comes down to Jaden Maiava. I think we all understand that. He is one of those kind of, I don't want to say it, but I will say it, Walgreens brand of Caleb Williams. He has some of that, escapability. He has some of that big playability. Just hasn't really put it together week over week. If he can put it together for a couple of games at a time, it doesn't need to be, a 10-win season or an 11-win season for USC. It could very well be a season where USC wins some massive games, maybe even beats a Notre Dame or something like that later in the season, and you look up and they're very firmly in the CFP race, or at the very least are very firmly a team that's messing up everyone else's CFP odds in the Big Ten, because it's still a very talented team. Obviously, people have differing opinions about Lincoln Riley, but at the end of the day, it's a very talented team with an offense that has all the upward mobility in the world and a defense that continues to improve. Then you got Iowa. They kind of have the opposite problem. They got to find a way to play some offense. Mark Gronowski coming in from North Dakota State, I think does that. I think they're South Dakota State. I apologize. One of the very, very confusing things about the FCS. But at the end of the day, I think he does up that offense just a little bit. How much does he up it is the big time question, because the defense is going to be great. I'm totally beyond questioning Phil Parker. I don't care who's on that defense. He's going to make it a top 20 unit in the entire country, probably a top 10 unit. So not worried about Iowa's defense in any way. Can they get enough on the offensive side of the ball to make these games interesting? Because Iowa can beat just about anyone in this conference because of the level they play on defense. And if they can put it together for an afternoon on offense where maybe it's not always pretty, but you hit one big-time play, and then you would have a 12-play drive that gets you all the way down the field in the end zone, you get to 17, 20 points, maybe 23 points on a really crazy day maybe, you're in position to win a lot of these games. And Iowa's one of those teams that we could look up around week 7, week 6, and they might be undefeated and be a really, really tough out because of that defense. Moving forward to the teams that are just racing to 6 wins. I'll start with Minnesota. I really like this team. I really do think they can put together a pretty interesting season and maybe be the team that kind of throws a wrench into the works for some of these elite teams in the conference. But Drake Lindsey is going to take over at quarterback, it seems. Redshirt freshman. He was the number 1 guy in Minnesota when he came out. Very talented kid. And then Coy Parrish has been taking a lot of the headlines. We'll actually talk about both those guys here in a second, but remarkable talent on that team. And I think you look at the Gophers, it's an uphill battle. There's no doubt about that. But they have dudes, and they have guys that can totally change games on a dime. They might be one of those teams that you look up and it's 16-13 against Penn State late in the fourth quarter, and then Coy Parrish returns a punt for a touchdown, and the entire game changes on a dime. So that'll be a really interesting team to watch. I think it's one of those that probably won't put together, a crazy 10-win season or anything. Absolutely can be a team that is really fun to watch week in and week out. And then Drake Lindsey goes into 2026 as one of the better quarterbacks in this conference. Then you go over to Maryland, and MJ Morris is likely going to be the guy over there. I like Maryland. I think they're a little bit stuck right now. I like Mike Locksley. I don't think it's going to come together over there at Maryland. So I think 6 wins would be a little bit of a blessing for this team. I think they're plenty capable of getting there. I think they have some really nice pieces, but at the end of the day, it's going to be an uphill battle in a lot of games where you're just going to be out talented in a lot of ways. So don't have a ton of faith in Maryland, but I do think they have the chance to get to 6 wins. Then you have UCLA, and the Nico situation is going to be obviously the thing that people talk about the most on this. I think 6 wins would be massive. Now, they could get above that. They do have some really good talent on the outside. Nico does have that top end ability. Like we were talking about when he was at Tennessee, it wasn't all together last year. There's no doubt about that. But you saw the upward trajectory, and you saw the ability that he could be one of the top quarterbacks in the SEC or one of the top quarterbacks in the country. That doesn't change at UCLA. It's just the pieces around him become a little bit less talented. But I love the addition of him and Tino Sunseri together. I think it's a team that could do some interesting damage. I don't necessarily think they're going to do incredible things this year. I do think they're a team that you don't want to travel down to LA for a game, maybe all the way across the country for a Penn State or something, and then it gets a little bit sketchy. Apologies, I don't have all the schedules right in front of me, so I might be getting these matchups just a little bit off. But regardless, I do think UCLA can be just a thorn in the side for some of these teams this upcoming year. Then you got Wisconsin. They got to figure something out. They just have to. They have to find a way to do something interesting this year. Not necessarily, go to 10 wins and totally rewrite what Wisconsin's going to be and what Luke Fickell's legacy is going to be there, but just get to 6 wins. Just show everyone that you can play tough and maybe get one of those big-time wins. Maybe get one big-time upset. I love the addition of Billy Edwards at quarterback. I really do. He's coming over from Maryland. Maryland had a terrible offensive line last year. Billy Edwards was running for his life, and he still put up pretty good numbers, still played some pretty good football for them. If Wisconsin can play better offensive line, get a better run game next to him, I think they could be a dangerous offense. I don't think they're going to be elite. Losing Will Pauling kind of really hurts that ability, but I do think they're one of those teams that you could look up and they're in a dogfight with Penn State, much like they were last year. So always going to be a little bit of a tough out, especially at Camp Randall. I think that quarterback gives them a little bit more of that upward mobility in games than they had last year. Then you got Rutgers. I don't know if it's going to be pretty. I'll be honest with you. I think losing Kyle Monangai is about as big of a loss as you're going to find across this conference this year in the context of that team. But I think they could do it. I think 6 wins would be great. And I think you're in a position where Ethan Kaliak-Manis hopefully can put together a little bit more of a consistent season this year, and maybe you can scratch out 6 wins. And to be totally honest, in a conference like this, that's a big-time win for Rutgers. And then you have Michigan State. This is a very interesting team to me. I think they've done a lot of really, really good stuff in the portal. I think Aiden Childs is one of those athletes that you can just never count out, and one of those games that every single time that you see Michigan State on the TV, they might be down by a lot, they might not be fully in games. There's going to be one moment where Aiden Childs puts it all together, where defenses have no idea how to stop this guy, and then he becomes a problem for the rest of the league. Now, I don't know if it's going to be this year, I don't know if it's going to be next year. I think this kid is uniquely talented, and I think he has the ability to maybe be the story of the season, at least for a week at some point, maybe the Diego Pavia type story of the season if they were able to beat Ohio State or Penn State or Oregon throughout this year, and he would have a ton to do with it. I can promise you that. And then you got 2 teams at the bottom. I'm sorry, Northwestern. I'm sorry, Purdue. It's not going to be great. I'm just going to be totally honest. Preston Stone comes in at Northwestern to be the quarterback. That'll be interesting to watch. There's no doubt about that. I think that's one of those things that you'll see, how he kind of adapts to the Big Ten after a weird time at SMU throughout his time there. But at the end of the day, these 2 teams are going to have a rough year. It's not going to be all that pretty. Every team above them is a little bit more talented. Every team above them just has a little bit more of everything. And I hate to say it that way, but I think all those fans understand that. Purdue added some really interesting pieces that we'll get to here in a second, but it's not going to be pretty for these 2 teams, the same way it's not been pretty for a while for these 2 teams. But overall, the Big Ten's pretty tough to nail down. I do think there's a little bit more of distinct tiers than some other conferences out there. I think it's really just because the top is so crystalline. You know those three teams are going to be the best three teams in the conference. At least you feel very confident that those are going to be the best three teams in the conference. After that, I think it's a lot of teams that have upward mobility, but also have the ability to lose to just about anyone on their schedule. So it's going to be really, really interesting to watch all of that unfold. Let's take a little bit of a break here, and we'll talk about all the players that will make that happen one way or the other. For Illinois, they got a really big-time transfer wide receiver coming in that just has to hit. And we'll talk about all of it right after this, so stick with us.